Over here, this is the north bridge, and this is the south bridge. The south bridge does not do a lot of work like the north bridge, and so this particular machine, they did not even bother to provide a heatsink. If you check the machine on the screen, you see that they've provided a very small heatsink for the south bridge too. Can you see? They provided a small heatsink, but the north bridge has a bigger one. Can you see? Can you see? The north bridge has a bigger heatsink. Alright, good morning. Today we want to continue with our studies on computer hardware, and we are still looking at the hardware components. Before I begin my lecture, I want to point out something important in this video. Over here, when the computer is being set up, the power cables, these cables are called power cables. Some people may call it power supply cable because it goes directly into the power supply unit and comes into a surge protector or an extension board. It is very important to use an extension board or a surge protector because inside the extension board there is a fuse. I believe you all know what a fuse is. There is a fuse in this extension board so that in case of a power surge or an electrical disturbance, your PC will not be damaged. Because of this extension board, when there is an electricity disturbance or a power surge, the fuse within this extension board will cut and go off and take the damage and protect the computer. That is why we have fuses. Fuses are there so that when something blows up, it doesn't affect the entire house or the device. The fuse is there to receive the damage so that the device will be safe. So if you plug your computer directly, now we are talking about desktop here. If you plug your desktop computer directly into the wall, that means you are receiving direct current into your system. And so when there is an electrical disturbance, it goes straight into your system, and it is your power supply unit that will blow up. Because in the power supply unit, there are also components to also ensure power safety. So your power supply unit will blow up. And the only way you can get your computer back is to replace your power supply unit. And I don't think that is easy to do. The best thing to do is to use the extension board and plug your cable from the extension board to your computer and plug the extension board's cable into the main wall outlet. This is a power cable, and this cable is plugged directly behind, first of all, your monitor and your system unit. Now your system unit, the part of the system unit that is receiving this power cable is the power supply unit. I don't know if you can see it here. This is the power supply unit. All right. The last time we talked about a number of components, and we discussed the case, we discussed the power supply unit, and we wanted to point out the core components of the computer system before we talk about the peripherals. So the next component to look at is our motherboard. Hello. We want to look at our motherboard. Have you seen a motherboard before? This is a motherboard. This is an amazing component in computers, and it is called a printed circuit board, or PCB. This is a main circuit board in your computer that every connection to your computer comes onto. If your computer will be connected to anything, that connection comes onto the motherboard. If you have a monitor connected to your computer, guess what? It will use this port to come onto the motherboard, to be connected to the motherboard. If you are using your expansion slots and you are connecting expansion cards, guess what? Your expansion cards will come onto your motherboard. If you are connecting your memories or your RAM, random access memory, you connect onto the motherboard. If you are trying to connect your central processing unit or your microprocessor, guess what? You connect to the motherboard. If you want to connect a printer to your computer, guess what? You connect to the motherboard. If you want to connect sound into your computer and also have the ability to hear sound, guess what? You connect to the motherboard. Are you with me? If you want to join the World Wide Web, connect to the internet, guess what? You connect to the motherboard. Every single connections to a computer comes onto the motherboard. So this motherboard is a piece of component that is really important to focus on and understand. So that is what we hope to achieve today, and we'll do our best to cover most of the parts of the motherboard. Please, are you here? All right. First of all, let me read what is here. It says a motherboard is the main PCB or printed circuit board in a computer. When we talk about printed circuit board or circuit board, every electronic device has a circuit board. Even a remote, if you open this remote, you see a circuit board. If you open a radio, you see a circuit board. Whatever electronic device you open, you are going to find what? A circuit board. And guess what? Computers also have a circuit board. Computers have a giant circuit board, which is called the main circuit board or the main PCB. Its function is to connect and allow communications between all other hardware components connected to the computer. Its function is to connect and allow communication between all other hardware components connected to the computer. The motherboard itself is a hardware component, and the main function of the motherboard is to become a connection point or a hub for all other hardware that will ever be connected to the computer. They are all connected directly onto the motherboard. Number two, the motherboard allows communication between all the components, from the CPU to the RAM and all other components. This is our motherboard. You can spend a whole year learning about the motherboard and you will not finish. This motherboard is an amazing technology. But as a computer student, you need to at least get some of the basics, because you will need to understand them to understand computers. So let's look at some of the basic parts of the motherboard. We are not just talking about the motherboard and ignoring everything. We are going onto the motherboard, scan the motherboard, and talk about the various components on the motherboard. Are you with me? Hello. Let me read from my second note. It says that the motherboard is an electronic printed circuit board that provides connectivity and also allows communication between the CPU, RAM, hard drive, and all other hardware components and peripherals of a computer system. It is the main PCB or printed circuit board in a computer. So let's get right into the lesson. I will talk about what we are seeing on the screen, and after that I'll pick a sample motherboard and we will look at it. Now, the goal of this particular training is for you to understand the computer system. And after I finish with my presentation, I'm going to allow each and every one of you to do your own presentation and take us through the motherboard and the computer system, talking about the various internal and external components. And that will solidify your understanding and give you revelations and deepen your knowledge and make you better. And after you achieve that, computers will be so easy for you and you'll be happy to know more. Let's get right into it. Parts of the motherboard. Here are some of the most important parts. First of all, we have what is called the CPU socket. The CPU socket. When you look at this picture, this is a CPU socket. Have you seen this portion? Maybe it is not very clear to you, but this is a CPU socket. When you are given a real motherboard and you are asked to identify the CPU socket, you should be able to point it out. And the CPU socket is actually one of the first places your eye should go to whenever you hold a motherboard. Because a CPU socket is a socket that is holding the most important component of computers, which is the microprocessor or the central processing unit. So inside this CPU socket, we need to understand that this is where the CPU is fixed or placed or housed. This is where the CPU sits. Right now there's no CPU, but this is a CPU socket. Do you understand? Hello. So this thing is called a socket. It is called what? And it's a socket for what? For the CPU. When I bring the real motherboard, I'll give you a CPU and I'll ask you to fix it for me. And when you are given a CPU, you are not going to fix it on the north bridge or the south bridge. You are supposed to fix it onto the CPU socket. Are you with me? All right. So what is a CPU socket? The CPU socket is the connector on the motherboard that houses the CPU. It uses a series of pins to connect the CPU to the motherboard. Remember, everything needs to be connected to what? The motherboard. So the CPU socket is where the CPU itself, the most important component of a computer system, that is where it is connected onto the motherboard. In the CPU, we have pins. And if you don't see pins on your CPU, there will be pins in the socket. So there are some CPUs that have the pins. For example, the CPU in this picture here, you see that has lots of pins, right? Some CPUs have the flat plates here without the pins, but the pins are inside the socket. So there are two different kinds of CPU you'll find. Most of them are with the pins here. So these pins are used to establish connection between the socket and the motherboard, or the CPU and the motherboard. Are you with me? So when I ask you to point out a CPU socket, will you be able to do that? When I give you a motherboard and I ask you to show me where the CPU socket is, will you be able to show me? When I give you a motherboard and I point to this part and I ask you, what is this? Will you be able to tell me? So what is this part? Now don't look at this particular motherboard and say, oh, I know where it is. When you take any motherboard, you should be able to look for it. Do you think you can find it? Yeah. Excellent. Let's look at the next component. The next component, I wish I'll talk about the NOV bridge first, but let's move to the RAM slot, since CPU and RAM are like brothers and sisters. So let's move to the RAM slot. Now, over here, we have the what? RAM slot. We have the what? I didn't say RAM socket. I didn't say RAM port. I didn't say RAM anything. I said what? RAM slot. Now, have you seen RAM before? RAM. When we talk about RAM, do you know what we are talking about? Do you know what we are talking about? One day I asked the class, what is RAM? And someone said, a mail ship. Of course, a mail ship is called a RAM. But that's not what we are talking about here. We are talking about computers. So a RAM, what does it stand for? Random access memory. Have you seen one before? You've not seen one before. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the RAM slot is. Are you with me? Sorry, what the RAM is and what the RAM slot is. So first of all, this is how our RAM looks like. Have you seen anything like this before? This is called RAM. It's called what? I didn't say ROM. I said what? But do you know there's something called ROM? Hello? Do you know there's something called ROM? I'm not talking about ROM. I'm talking about what? Alright. So I'll be asking you to tell me the difference between RAM and ROM very soon. Alright. So what are we talking about right now? What are we talking about? Now this is a physical motherboard. So we can see everything, and most of the things you will see on the motherboard on the screen we are supposed to find here. Now, have you seen the RAM? Just like what we have on our screen, this is what we call RAM. Have you seen this? We'll be talking about what it does very soon, but who knows what this is? What does it do? It stores data. Okay, that's fine. Now, this RAM, this is where it's supposed to be connected. And so where we fix the RAM, don't ever forget the name of that slot. What is that slot called? Is it difficult? Is it difficult? It's not difficult. This is the RAM slot. Please, have you seen it? So this is a RAM slot. Now, we talked about the CPU socket, right? This is the CPU socket. On this motherboard, this is the CPU socket. Now, this CPU socket, it has a locker here. And this particular locker locks the CPU in safely. Not every CPU socket has a locker, but this particular one has the locker. Other CPU sockets have different ways of protecting the CPU. Some have some small screw that you can turn to lock the CPU. Others have lockers like this. Now, this is the CPU. Have you seen this? Now, you can see that with this CPU, there are no pins. Can you see that there are no pins? Let me find a different CPU with the pins. Now, have you seen this CPU? Most CPU looks like this, and there are lots of pins on it. This particular one has no pins, and so the pins are inside the what? The socket. So this is where we call the CPU socket. This part of the motherboard you can never forget. Anytime they call you and they ask you, what is this part called? You can never forget it. What is it called? The CPU socket. And this part here, what is it called? The RAM slot. This RAM slot, the RAM slot, what does it do? Let me read what is on the screen. I hope you can see. The RAM slot, also known as memory slot, is also known as what? Memory slot. Can you see it? Allows the computer memory to be inserted into the computer. So what we are calling RAM is the computer memory. Now when you hear the word memory, it tells you a whole lot. Memory. When you hear memory, what comes to your mind? When you hear memory, what comes to mind? No, when you hear memory, what comes to mind? When you are talking about any device and you hear that this is the memory, what comes to your mind? I'm not talking about human beings, okay? When we are talking about devices, let's say a smartphone, and you hear that this is the memory, what comes to your mind? Storage, right? Good. So this, we'll get into it. This is the main memory of a computer. This is the words. The main memory of a computer. Do you get me? The main memory. We have other storage devices like this one. What is this called? This is a hard disk drive. The hard disk drive is the secondary memory or secondary storage of the computer system. If you want the main memory or main storage, is this. And we'll talk about why this is the main storage. And this is where it is connected. It is just a stick. So this one, when you pick this, you can call this a memory stick. Or if you want to be more technical, you can say this is a memory module. A memory module. So the memory module, this is where we connect it to the motherboard. That's good. So now it allows the computer memory to be inserted into the computer. Most motherboards have 2 to 4 memory slots, which determine the type of RAM used with the computer. All right. How many slots do you see here? Please, how many do you see? 2 slots, right? When you look at the motherboard on my PC, how many slots can you see? How many slots can you see? You can see 4. I like that. So this particular PC or this particular motherboard is having 4 slots. The one I'm holding is having how many? 2 slots. What does it tell you? So this motherboard here on this computer here can take up to 4 memory sticks. You can take memory, RAM, 4 different ones and connect them onto this motherboard, and they will all work together as a team. Now, when we talk about computer memory, we need their storage capacities. Most memory sticks like this are like 2 gig. Most memory sticks like this have 2 gigabytes of space. Some have 1 gigabyte. Most of them are 2 gigabytes. There are some 4 gigabytes. I have one that is 4 gigabytes, just one. Now let's assume this is 2 gigabytes. How will you know? You see a sticker on the memory, and the sticker will tell you 2 gigabytes. When you see 2 GB, you know that it's what? 2 gigabytes, and you'll find it on this sticker here. Anytime you pick memory, look at the sticker and search for it. You will find the capacity there. If by one reason or the other the sticker is gone, when you turn on the computer, you can see the memory when the computer is on. The computer will tell you how much memory you have. Now, if this one is 2 gigabytes, and I have 4 slots, and I provide 4 different memory sticks into all the 4 slots, I told you that they all work as a team. When I on my computer, what will be my total memory size? Pardon? I'll have 8 gigabytes of memory. Are you getting me? I'll get 8 gig. Wow. Now let's say that someone is having just 4 gig and his machine is slow for him. With memory, one thing about memories is that the more you have, the more faster your computer is. Hello. The more memory you have, the more faster your computer is. Your computer can do more if you have more memory space. Your computer will be free to work. Your computer will not freeze if you have more memory. Have you seen a frozen computer before? You are using it and it freezes. Sometimes it will break. Sometimes it will be slow. Sometimes it will freeze and it will tell you not responding. Even the mouse cannot move. Have you seen that before? It's because there's not enough memory. Are you following? If you have more memory, your computer will not be slow. So let's say this person has 4 gigabytes of memory and he thinks his machine is slow and he wants to upgrade it. You can upgrade your computer. What can the person do to make his computer faster? Can add more RAM. So you have 4 gig, you have to open the system unit and check the slots, whether you have extra slots. So let's say when you open, you realize that you have 4 slots and 2 of them, there are 2 memory sticks in the 4 slots. So you have extra 2 slots. That means you can just go to a computer shop, tell them you want to buy memory, tell them you want 2 gig, 2 gig. They'll give you 2. Then you come to your machine, open it again, and the 2 extra slots, you connect your 2. At the end of the day, what will you have in total? No, you had 4 before, and you brought 2. So at the end of the day, you have what? 8 gig. Just after connecting this into the memory slots, when you on your computer, you realize that your computer is faster than ever before. At first, when you on the computer, it takes 20 seconds before it starts. This time, when you press the power button, just 5 seconds, your machine is ready to use. Hey, you open this program so free and fast. You try browsing and it's free. You open several windows and they are all free and they are all working. They are fast. When you click, you don't have to wait. As soon as you click, it happens. Wow. I know someone who had a machine. The machine was so slow. When he clicks, he can even go to the bathroom and bath. Finish bathing and come, and the thing is has not responded yet. One day, he clicked and he knew it would take time. So he went to the market to go and do shopping. I don't think that's how you want your machine to behave, because it will affect your performance and your productivity. You want your machine to be fast. This can be the secret. So when you open your machine and you see that you have 4 slots, you can add 2 extra memories. Now, what happens if you have just 2 slots and you have used all the 2? If that is the case, the only thing you can do is to drop all the 2, and instead of using 2, you go and buy 4, because we have some that are just 4 gig straight, just 4 gig. So you can buy 4 gigabyte, and come and connect them 4, and you have 8. Is that okay? You had a question? They are not the same at all. And as a matter of fact, the more you get into memory, the more you understand that there are different varieties, and you need a specific one for your machine. Not specific as in that's the only one your machine will work with, but the category that your machine needs. There are different types, so you need to know which one your machine uses. But we'll get into that later. So you've seen that this particular slot here, what is it called? It's called what? The RAM slot. Excellent. So now we've looked at 2 things on the motherboard that I think you will never forget. Hello. Let's move to the next most important component on the motherboard. That is the, what have I highlighted? The nerve bridge. The what? The what? The nerve bridge. Have you ever climbed a bridge before? Have you ever used a bridge before? Have you ever driven over a bridge before? Have you ever walked over a bridge before? Which bridge did you drive over? Adomi what? Okay. So in this country we have Adomi Bridge, the most famous bridge in Ghana. Now, what does bridges do? What does bridges do?
So they help us to cross the other side.
They help us to cross from one side to another side. That is very good. Inside computers, there are 2 bridges. We have the north bridge and the south bridge. Hello? I said inside computers, there are how many bridges? There's a north bridge. The north bridge is always closer to the CPU socket. North bridge and what? Now, when you check this particular CPU, you can see that the north bridge is here. I said it's always closer to what? And we have another bridge here that is called what? The south bridge. This particular machine, that's a north bridge, and the north bridge is actually not what I'm pointing at, but it is under this. What you see here is a small component called a heatsink. This is not the main heatsink in computers. In this machine, this is the main heatsink. We'll be talking about heatsinks very soon. This is the main heatsink. And when we get to heatsinks, we will learn that heatsinks like this one sit directly on top of the CPU. Hello. The reason why this heatsink is designed, this big thing is designed to sit on the CPU, is because the CPU is the component in a computer that generates the most heat. Because the CPU is the main and master component in the computer, it does a lot of work and it generates a lot of heat. If your computer is allowed to run for 5 minutes without a cooling system, the computer can blow up and spoil. Or sometimes they are designed to go off by force to protect the machine. So you will not be able to use a computer for 5 minutes or at most 10 minutes without a cooling system. It's not possible. And so every computer needs a cooling system. In this machine, this is a cooling system design. This is one part of the cooling system. This thing works with a fan. Have you ever seen a fan in a computer before? Do you see this?
Yes.
Is it a fan? This fan can you see this? Inside the computer, this is how it's designed. So the heat sink is here, and there's a fan attached to it. And these two provide the cooling system for this computer. See how big it is. Later you'll learn about some computers that uses water cooling system. And there's water inside the system unit.
Water cooling is a great way to keep your computer running ultra cool and ultra quiet. And while it takes a bit of work to set up, it can be much more effective than traditional air cooling with fans. It's great for gamers, overclockers, or anyone else that would like to just keep their computer running silent and cool, not to mention looking awesome.
Cooling it. It sounds strange, but it's true and most effective. It's the most effective. I said the CPU generates a lot of heat, and so this particular heat sink is designed to sit on it so that it will draw the heat out of it. And with the help of the fan, the heat will be expelled and the CPU will be cooled. So if the CPU is not cooled and the heat is not blown away and the heatsink is also not cooled, the CPU will become overheated and it will damage the entire system, or it will be damaged. That same way, any component that generates any amount of heat, there's usually a cooling system provided for it. So the nerve bridge here, because of the work it does, it is giving some small heat sink, a very small one. And this heat sink, let me try and remove it. Have you seen a very small heat sink? Like a baby heat sink. Over here, this is the nerve bridge, and this is a SAT bridge. The SAT bridge does not do a lot of work like the nerve bridge. And so this particular machine, they did not even bother to provide a heat sink. If you check the machine on the screen, you see that they've provided a very small heat sink for the SAT bridge too. Can you see? They provided a small heat sink, but the nerve bridge has a bigger one. Can you see? Can you see? The nerve bridge has a bigger heat sink. Now let's talk about what the nerve bridge does. Are you ready to know? Okay, I told you that it's very important. I'm going to read it and I'll explain it. Now, the nerve bridge is one of the two chips on the motherboard known as the chipset. There are two chips on the motherboard known as what? Chipset. Very soon I'll tell you why they are called chipset. When we talk about a chipset on the motherboard, it is referring to these two chips. The nerve bridge and the what? They are called the what? The chipset. Hello? I didn't say chips. They are called what? Chipset. Okay, now let's talk about the nerve bridge. The main function of the nerve bridge is to control all the high-speed communications on the motherboard. That is, between the CPU, the RAM, and the PCI Express controller. Now let me explain. Do you see all the various components on the motherboard? Do you see all the various components on the motherboard? They all communicate among themselves. They share information and they communicate among themselves. They work together to make the computer work. But what you need to understand is that before any communication needs to be done, the communication needs to pass through a bridge. Please, are you with me? The communication passes through a bridge. And so when computers are designed in a way that there are two bridges, and the bridges control the communication. For example, the RAM and the CPU. For the CPU to talk with the RAM, they all go through the nerve bridge. Please, are you here? For the CPU to talk to the RAM, it needs to go through the nerve bridge. Do you have let's say when we are having a meeting and everyone is talking, do we have a moderator or an MC who controls who speaks and who controls the communication? You've seen something like that, right? Okay, sometimes even when we are having Zoom meetings, we have a moderator who allows everyone to speak. So when it's your turn, he will give you the floor that now it's your turn to speak. If it's not your turn, you'll not be allowed to speak, so that the communication goes smoothly and everyone is not talking at the same time. Please, have you seen anything like that? Computers are designed in a way that whenever communication is going on, we have certain chips that controls the communication. This motherboard is called an ATX motherboard. ATX motherboard. Many years ago, we had a motherboard called the AT motherboard. Let me try and show you the AT motherboard, and I think it will help you understand this a little bit. On this screen right now, you can see two folders, right? Please, are you here? Can you see two folders? This one is what? AT motherboard, and this is what? ATX motherboard. So I said the one I'm holding is called what? Let me show you the AT motherboard. It's an olden type of motherboard. Now, let me open to this picture here and show you. Those days, when we had the AT motherboard, this is how they look like. Please, have you seen this? There are a lot of chips. There are a lot of chips. Can you see the chips here? Plenty. And these chips, they control communications in the computer. So each chip controls something. Let's say this is a network controller. Let's say this is a video controller. Let's say this is a keyboard controller. Let's say this is a memory controller. Let's say this is a PCI controller. These chips, they were designed to control all the components and all the communications on the computer or the motherboard. Later, what they realized was that the AT motherboard looks ugly. It's not nice. So what did they decide to do? They agreed that from this point forward, we are going to design new motherboards and create only 2 chips. And we'll call the 2 chips chipsets. And these chipsets will be united in the sense that they will control all the communications on the motherboard. Instead of designing a chip for each component, now we are making just 2. And the 2 will be responsible for controlling all communications and all components. Are you with me? And so the ATX motherboard was created. And they created 2 bridges or 2 chips or the chipset. And they call the first one the North Bridge and they call the second one the South Bridge. At first we had about 50 chips. Now we have 2. Do you like motherboards with just 2 chips or 50? I think the 2 is nicer, right? Okay. So the first one here, the North Bridge, it controls 3 powerful components. Hello. I said the first chipset here, it controls the 3 most powerful components on the motherboard. That is, number 1, the CPU. The CPU is the most high speed and most powerful component on every computer. This is what controls the communication of the CPU. Number 2, the RAM. The second fastest component on the motherboard is this one, the RAM. Now the slot is here, but we'll put RAM inside. RAM is fast. CPU is faster than RAM. There is another component that is also fast. That component is here. It is a PCI Express slot or a PCI Express card. We'll talk about the expansion slots and you will see what the PCI Express is and the PCI. I told you that they have names, right? Today I'm revealing the names to you. One of them is called PCI Express. Have you seen PCI Express? And this one is called PCI. So there's a difference between PCI and PCI Express. The PCI Express is modern. I told that one is old, right? Last time I told you one is old and one is new. The PCI Express is new and it is used to slot in powerful cards or powerful adapters that will expand the functionality of the computer. So whatever will be put in the PCI Express slot is fast. And so because these 3 are super fast, very fast, we have decided to give them a special bridge. And that bridge is what controls their communications among themselves and sometimes to other components as well. By the time we finish learning about the components on the motherboard, everything will make a lot of sense to you. Right now, we are saying that the CPU is fast, the RAM is fast, and whatever will be connected to the PCI Express slots is also fast. Because these 3 are extremely fast, the North Bridge is dedicated to just these 3 components. So what is the function of the North Bridge? It controls communications between the CPU, the RAM, and the PCI Express slots. Listen, all other components on the computer do not operate as fast as these 3. And so because they are all slow, they are all controlled by the what? The South Bridge. That is why sometimes the south bridge is not even giving a heat sink. Let's read a little bit about the south bridge. The south bridge is the second chip on the motherboard known as the what? Chipset. The south bridge controls all the slow speed communications on the motherboard. That is between the hard drive, USB, PCI, IDE, BIOS, Ethernet, and so on. So all the other components, their communications are controlled. Now we are talking about communications, right? Hello. We are talking about communications. Their communications are controlled by the south bridge. Every communication on the computer is controlled by a chip. Now there are two main chips on the computer that controls all communications. The north bridge controls the high speed components, and the south bridge controls the low speed components. Hello, are you here? If you turn the motherboard, you are going to see a lot of lines. If you turn the motherboard, you are going to see a lot of lines. All of these are communication lines or wires. In IT or in computing or in computer engineering, we call these buses, communication buses or buses. Hello. Over here, I can see which component is here. Please, have you seen this? That is what I see here, right? Over here, I think this, okay, this is the north bridge, right? So let's check here. Do you see this? 1, 2. And let's check the PCI Express. This is a PCI Express. This is where it is. So this PCI Express is here. Please, have you seen this? So 1, 2, and 3. If you want to trace their lines, they all lead here. This one, if you trace the lines, it leads here. This one, if you trace the lines, it leads here. This one leads here. This one leads here. This one here also leads here. That means they are all coming to one point, one bridge. So what is here? What is there? The north bridge. If you trace the line, you just see it very clearly. They are all going into the north bridge. So that is where they cross over to each other to share information and to communicate. You know that the CPU communicates with the RAM a lot, right? Anytime the computer is on, the CPU communicates with the RAM all the time. And their communication is fast. Before the blink of an eye, a lot can be achieved by the computer. You know how computers are fast? You know how computers are fast? When we get into the CPU itself, you realize that the CPU, this CPU, hello, in just 1 second, this CPU can process or can run 2 billion cycles in 1 second. Wait a minute. I didn't say 5 cycles in 1 second. We know 1 second. Do you know 1 second? Okay. If they tell you that something runs 5 times in a second, you say that, oh, then it's fast. Okay, wait a minute. I didn't say 5. If they tell you that something runs 100 times in 1 second, you say, hey, then this thing is very fast. 100 times in 1 second? Wait a minute. What if you are told that something runs 1,000 times in 1 second? That means every millisecond it finishes one. 1,000 times in 1 second. Do you know 1 second? Are you sure you know 1 second? I'm not talking about 1 minute. You know, 1 second. Now your CPU does not, the average CPU does not run 1,000 times a second. Not even 1 million times. Wait a minute, wait. 1 million times in 1 second. That is crazy already. The average CPU does not even run 1 million times in a second. Not even 1 billion times. The average CPU runs 2 billion cycles per second. We call it 2 gigahertz. If there's something that operates 2 billion times, it can run 2 billion tracks in a second. Wait a minute, wait. Wait a minute. Have you seen athletes running before? Huh? Who is the fastest athlete or the runner in the world? Huh? Bolt, huh? Okay, so let's imagine Bolt running the whole field, and in 1 second he can complete the whole track. I mean the whole cycle. Not just that, they say Bolt has become powerful and he can run 1,000 times in 1 second. Can you believe it? This one is not 1,000, it's not million, it's not even 1 billion. The average computer runs at 2 billion. Wait a minute, do you know 2 billion times in just a second? That is why computers can process information so fast. Now the speed we are talking about is not small. So this CPU and this RAM, they communicate at high speed, super high speed, and they need a controller. So they all communicate through this bridge, and this bridge is called what? And this bridge is called what? Now I'm going to ask you the difference between the north bridge and the south bridge, but before I do, I want to show you something. Over here I have something here. What is this? Pardon? Are you sure? Are you sure? What is this? Hey, I thought you said this was RAM. How can RAM be small like this? We have different sizes. Okay, let me tell you. When it comes to motherboards like this, okay, and this is a desktop motherboard, right? The sizes in terms of the length are similar. So when we say there are different types, it's not about the height or the length. Sorry, you not see one long like this. Are they? They are all like this. What makes them different is the notch in the middle. Can you see some hole in the middle? Okay, so later we'll talk about them. But why do we have one long one and one short one? Who can tell me why? Why do we have this small one and we have this long one? Who can tell me? Excellent. Laptops are designed to be small, and so when you study about laptops, you realize that every component has been squeezed. Later, if you study more and more, you'll see that it's difficult to make laptops, and laptops have some limitations in terms of expanding their capabilities. Desktop, you have expansion slots. You can expand the capabilities of your desktop easily. You can add more hard drive. Did you see the system unit I showed the last time with more slots for hard drive? Laptop, you can't do that because everything has to be made small. This is a memory for laptop, small. Look at the hard drive for laptop. It's small, right? This is a normal hard drive. But you can't put this in a laptop. If you put this in a laptop, you can't carry it. Alright. So now tell me the difference between the north bridge and the south bridge. You will all come and do a presentation here and you talk about these things. And we are teaching you so that you have the knowledge. That's why I'm taking my time. The last time I told you that these are called expansion slots. You remember? And I told you that they have names. Right now I can see two different types of expansion slots. Why in the world do we call them expansion slots? Because if you want to expand the capability of your computer, this is what you use. Do you know that there are some computers that can watch TV? They can show TV. You can watch TV on your computer. Have you ever watched TV on your computer before? Huh? If you have a computer, you don't even need a TV because you can turn your computer into a TV by just getting what we call a TV card. A TV card looks like this. In IT, when we talk about cards, it's not like business card. When we talk about cards, cards look like this. Have you seen these kind of things? These are cards. They are electronic cards and they expand the functionalities of your computer. And what they do will be displayed at the ports they have behind them. So this one is simply a USB card. It gives me additional USB ports. So if I need more USB ports and my computer doesn't have enough, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say I need more USB ports. I have to go and buy a USB card. And what will I do? I'll connect it into the expansion slot. When I do this, behind my system unit, 2 ports will appear immediately. Then at the back of my computer, I can connect a pen drive or any USB here. This card, this is also a card. In computer hardware, when we say card, card looks like this. This card here is called a graphics card. It's called a graphics card because of the ports it makes available to you at the back here. This particular graphics card, with this card, if I connect this to my computer will display high quality graphics. Everything I see on my computer will be sharp, very sharp. Have you ever been to where they sell TVs and sometimes they have some TVs or monitors displaying some waterfalls and some landscapes and some animations? Have you seen those kind of things before? Some of them look very quality, right? Please, are you here? Good. In computers, if you want your display to be more, you need a graphics card. Your display quality. If you want your display quality to be higher than what you are getting, you need a graphics card. Number 2, if you are using a program like a video editing program, editing program needs more graphics. If you don't have a graphics card, the program will not even work on your computer. There are some computer games, like soccer games, that need more graphics. If you don't have a graphics card, those games, they will not work on your computer. There are some new computer games that if you don't have a graphics card, they will not even work. So graphics cards are needed for some specific applications to work. Let's say you're an architect and you want to use a 3D software to model a house on your computer before they build a house. You can't use that kind of software on your computer if your graphics is not enough. So when we talk about computer graphics, sometimes we need more graphics capability. So sometimes some software requires higher graphics processing. So those kind of programs, You can't even use them if you don't have this. If you're a graphic designer, video editor, or a 3D animator, you can't even use your software if you don't have this. Number two, if you're a gamer, there are some games they will not work if you don't have this. Apart from that, this helps you to get high quality display. So when we talk about graphics processing, this is it. So with this, where will I fix it? Watch this. This is exactly where it will be fixed. Can you see? When I add this, I have brought a different hardware and I've added it to my computer. That is why we call those slots expansion slots. They expand the capabilities of your computer by inserting different expansion cards. These are called expansion cards. Are you here? There's another card called sound card. If your computer is not producing sound and you've tried everything and the sound is still not coming, you have to go and buy a sound card and come and slot it in the expansion slot. And now you can plug your speakers and your sound will work. Now listen. The sound is not coming. Your machine is not producing sound. Maybe the onboard sound system is damaged and sound is not coming at all. The only way you get sound is to buy what you call sound card and slot it. When you slot it, you get some ports like this where you can plug your speakers and you get sound. Let's say you have a desktop and desktop cannot get access to Wi-Fi. Almost all desktops cannot catch Wi-Fi, but laptops can catch Wi-Fi, right? Because inside laptops we have Wi-Fi adapters. You can let your desktop catch or access Wi-Fi. Please, what I'm saying, do you understand me? Okay. You can let your desktop be able to connect to Wi-Fi. All you have to do is to go and buy a wireless network adapter or card. Wireless network card like this. All cards look like this. As soon as you take that card and you slot it in the expansion slot, your desktop will be able to connect to Wi-Fi. I get me. If you want to watch TV on your computer, you can go and buy a TV card. Connect the TV card and you can watch TV and listen to radio on your computer. So these particular slots are called expansion slots. Are you with me? Now these expansion slots, they are different types. Like this white one here, look at how it looks like. It's an old type. It is called PCI slot. PCI slot. PCI slot. Do you know what PCI stand for? Do you know what PCI stand for? Hello. PCI stands for Peripheral Components Interconnect. Did we talk about computer peripherals? Peripheral Components Interconnect is PCI. So this is where we slot PCI components or peripheral components that will have to come inside the system. Okay, so this is called PCI slot. There's a modern type here. This is a modern slot. This slot is not called PCI slot. When they ask you to point to PCI slot and you point to this black one or this long one here, this is not PCI. It's not about the color per se, but this one, this long one, if you say it's PCI, you are wrong. This is the PCI slot. This long one is called PCI Express. If you want to shorten it, you will say PCIe. So we have PCI Express slot, also known as PCIe. Now this PCI Express, there are 4 types. We have PCI Express by 16. This is a by 16. The by 16 is the longest one. We have PCI Express by 8, by 4, and by 1. So the by 8 is short, like half of this. By 4 is also like half again, and by 1 is small. Now, anything connected to the PCI slot operates at high speed. Sorry, I made a mistake. Anything connected to the PCI Express slot, not PCI. PCI is slow. That's why in the South Bridge you had PCI. In the PCI Express, anything connected to the PCI Express is fast. So the North Bridge controls the PCI Express, not the PCI. It controls the what? PCI Express, the RAM, and the what? Those are the high-speed components on the computer, and they are controlled by the North Bridge. Apart from that, all other components connected to the computer are controlled by the South Bridge. So that is fine. I think we've had enough for the day. All right, so we've been able to talk about the motherboard itself. And a quick question, what is the function of the motherboard? What is the function of the motherboard? In summary, the motherboard, number one, is a connection point for all computer hardware. Number two, it allows communication between the computer components. So any hardware that will ever be connected to the computer system will be connected to the motherboard. It is a main connection point. Is that clear? Excellent. So I want to thank you for joining this class today. This has been an interesting one. We'll continue next time and we'll look at other hardware.